Well, joining me is Francis Gurry. He's the Director General of World Intellectual Property Organization. Now, WIPO has come up with a report where India ranks 52nd in the Global Innovation Index, up from 5 points from 2018. Gary, thank you for joining us and speaking to Bloomberg.
It's my pleasure.
Talk about what went in India's favor for that improvement in 5 points this year.
Yes, well, I think first of all we should notice that this is part of a trend. So it's not just a one-year improvement.
Right.
This is a trend from number 81 5 years ago to number 52. Extraordinary. So we have every reason to expect this trend to continue. Now, what are the strengths of India? Well, I think they're quite well known. India excels in ICT exports, information communications technologies exports. It excels in scientific publications. It excels in the quality of some of its educational institutions, which are world class, of course. And there are the number of engineers produced, for example, and scientists. So there are a lot of positive factors going in India's favour, I think.
But India still lags behind some of the other big economies. Look at US, China, Switzerland, Denmark. What India needs to do to get into that first at 25 club and then the 10 club.
Yeah. So I think what we see in India is some great excellence, and then we must always remember a vast and diverse country. So one of the things about an index is, of course, that it doesn't measure the performance of the best spots, such as Bengaluru. It's measuring the whole economy and the whole country, and for a vast, diverse country, this is a little bit of a disadvantage. But some of the things that perhaps where it would be good to see some improvement is investment in research and development, first of all. It stands at roughly 0.3% of GDP, and that is well below the investment in research and development that you would find elsewhere. Then when we start to unpick the research and development, we see that the government is in the lead. Well, that's not highly unusual. Governments are always an important investor in research and development, and should be, because it addresses areas that the market economy does not necessarily address, like neglected diseases. But we do need to see much more investment in research and development on the part of industry and business. I think this would reflect in the performance and the competitiveness of the whole economy.
Right, and how much of that, Prime Minister Modi's, the big Make in India push also added to that, and what needs to be done? Because perhaps a part of the move should be also to boost research and development in the country, investment in the country for manufacturing sector and others. How has that played and how has that worked in India's favor?
Yes. Well, I think innovation is always a long-term process. So the countrywide national initiatives initiated by Prime Minister Modi, you've mentioned Make in India, Digital India, the enormous transformations in the health area, in payment systems, in transportation and infrastructure. These are all major projects which are going to bear fruit in the future, there's no doubt. Research and development, well, it's a mindset, I think. It's encouraging business to invest in a longer term perspective. Business to think that actually they have to create sustainable businesses that will not just return a profit in the next quarter, but are going to return a profit over the longer term. And research and development is, I believe, essential to the retention of competitiveness.
You mentioned about the protectionism approach by some of the countries as well. That could also slow down the growth. Are you seeing that approach in India also? And could that also play sort of slow down its growth?
Well, I think worldwide what we see, and I'm better qualified to comment on, I think, on world developments rather than Indian developments. But worldwide, yes, we're seeing these important signs of closure, whether it's increase in the number of protectionist actions taken, the lowering of foreign direct investment, the more stringent screening of foreign investment. Now, one noticeable thing is that many of these measures are related to technology. That's, I think, an indicator that technology is at the centre of competition in the world economy now. I think it's a very worrying development, because innovation depends on openness and connections. And connections between scientists around the world, between technologists around the world. We've seen in the course of the last 20 years the construction of global value chains, which have had a positive effect and an advantageous effect. And when we see the localization of value chains, for example, which is partly technology driven, because as you get advanced manufacturing and artificial intelligence, it's not necessary to outsource to cheaper centres of labour. This, I think, is going to have a profound effect on the world. And I do think we need to keep open channels. And openness, historically, has always been very important in creating innovation hubs and centres.
Theme being the medical innovation at this year's GII. Talk about, and India has protested against, keeping the price highs on the medical equipments and devices. But when you see that globally also, when patents are there, the prices of the devices go up. What is your view on that?
Well, I think you've got a very difficult policy question there, which is balancing the need for innovation and the need to provide adequate incentives for innovation, one of which is intellectual property protection, to be able to recover the investment in research and development and in innovation. But on the other hand, the need to distribute the social benefit of the innovations. So that's a tension that I don't think is capable of one single solution. I think it requires a balance to be found and refound, and it depends on the circumstance. If we have an epidemic, for example...
There's a social cost involved.
There's social cost involved. But if we have an epidemic, we might have a different balance from the balance that we have when there's no epidemic. So we need to be ever vigilant about this balance and to ensure that it is not distorted, that it doesn't favour one side more than the other. And distributing the social benefit, well, this is a question that I think is firmly within the flexibility of a country allowed by the international regime.
And then lastly, India has expressed concerns about attempt by big pharma companies to evergreen the IPs by making minor alterations or minor innovations. Where does WIPO stand?
Well, I think that you'll find that it's a principle of every patent system that in order to merit the award of a property right, to get a patent, then there has to be an inventive step. That is, you have to make a leap which is not something that's obvious to any scientist skilled in that area. It has to really warrant the award of a patent and a property right. So there's no, again, international rule that covers this. There are differing regimes across the world. I think people are right to be vigilant about the award of property rights for trivial advances. We need to reserve property rights for genuine inventive steps that are not obvious and that make a good contribution to society.
Right. Great. Pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time and speaking to us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.